Jet-age air war cinema is not about explosions alone. It is about discipline, pressure, trust, and machines pushed to their edge by human hands. Aircrews often recommend a small group of films to newcomers because these stories teach mindset before spectacle. These movies explain how pilots think, how crews survive, and why mistakes echo forever in the sky. Number 15, The Right Stuff, 1983. For newcomers, this is where jet culture truly begins. Not in combat, but in the dangerous, quiet moments where test pilots climb into experimental aircraft knowing that engineering theory may fail at any second. Aircrews recommend this film because it explains why jet pilots develop a particular mindset long before war enters the picture. Speed, altitude, and fear are treated as professional obstacles rather than thrills. The film captures how pilots speak, act, and think when lives depend on checklists, discipline, and trust in invisible forces. What aircrews respect most is how the movie shows the transition from propeller thinking to jet thinking. These pilots are not cowboys chasing glory. They are methodical men confronting unknown physics at extreme limits. Cockpit procedures are shown clearly. Emergencies unfold slowly and brutally. There is no instant heroism, just seconds of calculation followed by consequences. This prepares newcomers to understand why later combat films emphasize restraint over bravado. The Right Stuff also teaches something civilians rarely grasp. Flying jets is not about combat alone. It is about surviving boredom, isolation pressure, and constant risk long before a single enemy appears. Aircrews recommend it because it builds respect for the profession itself. By the time viewers reach combat-focused jet films, they already understand the psychological cost of sitting on top of controlled explosions for a living. Number 14, 12 O'Clock High, 1949. Although it predates the jet era, aircrews insist newcomers watch this early. The reason is leadership. This film is still shown in military classrooms because it explains command stress better than any technical manual. Jet pilots inherit this pressure amplified by speed and nuclear stakes. The movie shows how decisions made far from the cockpit can break crews emotionally even when missions succeed on paper. What resonates with modern aircrews is how fatigue accumulates invisibly. Crews do not collapse from one dramatic mission. They erode slowly under repetition loss and responsibility. The film avoids melodrama and instead shows emotional numbness, discipline cracking, and morale managed like fuel. These lessons translate directly into jet-age operations, where reaction times shrink but consequences multiply. Newcomers learn that air war is not won by talent alone. It is sustained by leadership choices, empathy, and limits. By understanding this foundation, viewers are better prepared to grasp jet-era command failures, nuclear escalation, fears, and cockpit-level obedience that later films explore. Aircrews recommend it because without this grounding, jet war stories lose their meaning. Number 13, The Bridges at Toko Ri, 1954. This is often the first jet combat film aircrews suggest, because it strips away fantasy immediately. Set during the Korean War, it presents early naval jet operations as dangerous, exhausting, and often futile. There are no super pilots here, just professionals executing missions they quietly question but never refuse. The tone is restrained, and that restraint is exactly why aircrews respect it. Flight sequences focus on approach patterns, fuel limits, and weather rather than heroics. Carrier landings feel tense because they are treated as routine hazards rather than climactic moments. Newcomers quickly learn that survival in jet warfare depends less on dogfighting skill and more on discipline, timing, and recovery. The film shows how jets magnify mistakes faster than props ever could. Most importantly, it teaches the emotional reality of jet-era warfare. Missions succeed, yet lives are still lost. Victories feel hollow. Aircrews recommend this film because it introduces the moral weight of flying jets into war zones where technology advances faster than strategy. It prepares viewers to understand later Cold War and Vietnam-era jet films where speed increases but certainty disappears. Number 12, Strategic Air Command, 1955. Aircrews often call this the most important Cold War aviation film ever made. It is not exciting in a conventional sense, and that is exactly why pilots respect it. Strategic Air Command explains nuclear-era flying as routine duty carried out under constant invisible pressure. The aircraft are enormous, the missions are repetitive, and the stakes are absolute. Newcomers learn very quickly that jet-age war is often about readiness rather than combat. The film shows bomber crews living on alert, rotating through training drills, and responding instantly to orders that may never come. Cockpit scenes focus on procedures, navigation coordination, and endurance rather than emotion. This teaches viewers that strategic aviation is a marathon of discipline, not a sprint of heroics. Aircrews recommend it because it reflects how real Cold War pilots lived for years, expecting the worst while performing the same missions daily. What also stands out is how the movie treats machines with respect. Aircraft are shown as systems requiring teamwork rather than extensions of ego. Every takeoff carries weight because fuel range, weather, and command authority all matter equally. For newcomers, this film establishes a critical truth. Jet-age war is often silent until it is not. By the time the audience reaches faster, louder jet films, they already understand why restraint and professionalism define real aircrew culture. Number 11, Top Gun, 1986. Despite its reputation, aircrews still recommend this film as a starting point when newcomers know nothing about naval aviation. It is not realistic in tone, but it introduces vocabulary hierarchy and carrier flight basics clearly. Pilots acknowledge its exaggeration, yet appreciate how it sparks curiosity rather than confusion. For many real aviators, this movie was their first exposure as well. What matters is not the spectacle, but the structure. Training rivalries, briefing rooms, debriefs, and flight discipline are presented in ways civilians can follow. The film explains why carrier landings are feared, why instructors matter, and why teamwork outweighs individual bravado. Even when drama is heightened, the foundation remains recognizable to those who have flown. Aircrews recommend Top Gun with an unspoken warning. Watch it first, then unlearn the myths. It opens the door to understanding jets as demanding machines rather than toys. Once newcomers grasp the basics introduced here, they are ready to appreciate subtler films that remove glamour and replace it with responsibility. In that sense, this film works as an orientation flight rather than a combat lesson. Number 10, The Hunters, 1958. This film earns aircrew respect for one reason above all others. It portrays jet combat psychology accurately. Set during the Korean War, it focuses on tension inside the cockpit rather than victory counts. Pilots are shown grappling with fear, hesitation, and pressure to perform under command expectations. For newcomers, this is an essential shift away from simplistic hero narratives. Flight scenes emphasize speed closure rates and limited reaction time. Engagements are brief, confusing, and often unresolved. This mirrors real jet combat, where decisions happen too fast for dramatic speeches. Aircrews recommend the film because it shows how ego and fear can be as dangerous as enemy aircraft. Mistakes do not come from incompetence, but from human limits pushed too far. Equally important is how leadership pressure affects pilots differently. Some crack, some adapt, and some hide their struggles. The film avoids judgment and instead observes consequences. For newcomers, this introduces a mature understanding of jet warfare. It is not about winning dogfights. It is about surviving them mentally. This prepares viewers for later Vietnam-era films, where technology advances, but human stress remains unchanged. Number 9, Dr. Strangelove, 1964. Aircrews recommend this film not because it is funny, but because it is terrifyingly accurate beneath the satire. Newcomers quickly learn that much of the absurdity is built on real Cold War procedures. Bomber protocols, crew coordination, and fail-safe logic are portrayed with unsettling precision. The humor works only because the structure underneath is real and rigid. What pilots respect is how the film shows systems overriding individuals. Once orders move through the chain, no single person can easily stop them. Cockpit scenes reflect how crews follow procedures even when doubt creeps in. This teaches newcomers that jet-age warfare is often driven by momentum rather than intent. Decisions made far from the aircraft still control lives in the sky. Aircrews often say this movie prepares viewers emotionally. It explains why nuclear-era pilots carried calm voices and dark humor. When consequences are absolute, detachment becomes survival. Dr. Strangelove introduces newcomers to the idea that professionalism can exist alongside fear and disbelief. It is essential viewing before watching more straightforward jet combat films because it explains the invisible pressure hovering over every Cold War flight. Number 8. Failsafe, 1964. Where Dr. Strangelove uses satire, this film removes all comfort. Aircrews recommend Failsafe because it shows the same nuclear command systems without jokes or relief. Everything unfolds slowly, deliberately, and relentlessly. Newcomers feel the weight of decision-making long before aircraft reach their targets. This mirrors how real alerts were experienced by crews and commanders. Cockpit scenes are quiet and procedural. Pilots speak little and follow orders precisely. The tension comes from what cannot be undone once systems activate. Aircrews value how the film shows obedience as both necessity and tragedy. There is no villain, only process error and human limitation. For newcomers, this film establishes the emotional baseline of the jet age. It teaches that air warfare is not always visible or explosive. Sometimes it is a voice over a radio and a countdown that cannot be reversed. Failsafe prepares viewers to understand why jet pilots trusted checklists more than instinct. It also explains why restraint became a moral requirement rather than a personal choice. Number 7. The Final Countdown, 1980. Aircrews approach this film cautiously, yet still recommend it for a specific reason. It captures carrier operations with rare clarity. Launch cycles, recovery procedures, deck choreography, and readiness culture are shown with respect. Even though the premise is fictional, the daily life aboard a carrier feels authentic to those who have lived it. Newcomers benefit from seeing how many people support every jet launch. Pilots are only one part of a complex moving system. The film emphasizes preparation, coordination, and constant alert status. This teaches that naval aviation success depends on discipline across hundreds of roles rather than individual brilliance. While combat scenarios stretch realism, the atmosphere does not. Aircrews recommend it as a bridge between spectacle and reality. It helps newcomers visualize how jets operate from the sea under continuous pressure. By the time viewers move on to darker combat-focused films, they already understand the environment where jet-age decisions are made and executed. Number 6. Bat-21, 1988. Aircrews recommend this film because it shows what happens after the cockpit is gone. Jet war is often imagined as speed and altitude, yet this story reminds newcomers that survival on the ground is part of the same mission. The film focuses on a downed airman navigating hostile terrain with limited support and constant threat. For pilots, this is not a side story, but an ever-present possibility. What resonates with Aircrews is the realism of vulnerability. Training confidence evaporates quickly once technology fails. The character survives through discipline, patience, and communication rather than heroics. Radio contact becomes lifeline rather than tactic. This teaches newcomers that jet warfare extends beyond the aircraft and into the human limits of endurance. The film also emphasizes teamwork across distance. Rescue crews, planners, and ground forces all share responsibility for one life. Aircrews recommend Bat-21 because it shows that every flight carries unseen consequences. It grounds jet-age warfare in flesh and fear, reminding viewers that professionalism matters most when everything else disappears. Number 5. Firefox, 1982. This film is often misunderstood, yet Aircrews still recommend it for specific reasons. While the premise leans into Cold War fantasy, the cockpit workload feels genuine. Pilots appreciate how the film portrays isolation systems management and mental strain rather than effortless dominance. Flying becomes a cognitive battle as much as a physical one. Newcomers learn that advanced jets demand constant attention. The pilot is not free to enjoy speed or power. He is overwhelmed by inputs, decisions, and pressure. This reflects real jet operations where technology multiplies responsibility rather than reducing it. Aircrews respect how the film treats flying as mentally exhausting rather than glamorous. Firefox also introduces Cold War paranoia in a way newcomers can grasp. Missions are shaped by secrecy, uncertainty, and mistrust. Pilots operated in an environment where information mattered as much as skill. While the aircraft itself is fictional, the stress is not. Aircrews recommend it because it teaches respect for cognitive load in jet-age combat. Number 4. Flight of the Intruder, 1991. Among naval aviators, this film holds special weight. Aircrews recommend it because it respects mission planning discipline and moral tension. Set during the Vietnam War, it portrays strike aviation as controlled violence shaped by rules, engagement, and political pressure. Newcomers quickly see that pilots do not choose targets freely. Flight scenes emphasize navigation timing and coordination rather than spectacle. Mistakes are punished immediately. Success depends on preparation more than courage. Aircrews appreciate how the film shows frustration with command limitations without turning pilots into rebels. Obedience and doubt coexist realistically. The emotional core of the film is restraint. Pilots carry anger and loss, yet must operate within imposed boundaries. This teaches newcomers a critical jet-age truth. Air warfare is not only about what you can do, but what you are allowed to do. Flight of the Intruder prepares viewers to understand later modern jet films where rules shape outcomes as much as enemy fire. Number 3. Devotion. 2022. Aircrews often recommend this film because it bridges early jet combat with modern emotional storytelling. Set during the Korean War, it focuses on trust between pilots rather than individual dominance. Newcomers quickly learn that early jet warfare was unstable, dangerous, and poorly understood. Aircraft failed frequently, and pilots relied on each other more than machines. What aircrews respect most is how the film portrays loyalty and restraint. Missions are flown with caution rather than bravado. Communication between wingmen matters as much as weaponry. The emotional bond shown on screen mirrors real squadron culture, where survival depends on mutual responsibility. The film also introduces newcomers to the transitional moment between propeller warfare and jet warfare. Speed increases, but reliability does not. This creates tension where pilots must manage fear while adapting constantly. Aircrews recommend Devotion because it humanizes jet war without romanticizing it. It reminds viewers that progress in aviation came at a human cost, paid quietly by those who flew first. Number 2. Battle of Britain, 1969. Although it depicts prop aircraft, Aircrews still insist newcomers watch this film before diving deeper into jet-age warfare. The reason is structure. Command control communication and large-scale coordination are portrayed with rare clarity. Jets inherited these systems and accelerated their consequences. Understanding this foundation is essential. Aircrews admire how the film respects procedure over heroics. Pilots wait, scramble, follow vectors, and engage briefly before returning to refuel. The sky is treated as a managed space rather than a playground. This mindset carries directly into jet operations, where fuel time and coordination become even more critical. For newcomers, the film teaches that air war is collective rather than individual. Victory emerges from logistics, radar planning, and leadership. Battle of Britain prepares viewers to understand why jet-age combat looks less dramatic but more dangerous. It grounds expectations and builds respect for the invisible systems that keep aircraft alive. Number 1. The Cold Blue, 2018. Aircrews place this documentary at the top because it removes fiction entirely. Restored combat footage and veteran voices strip jet-age romance down to lived memory. Although centered on earlier bombers, its lessons translate directly into jet warfare. Fear, discipline, and loss remain constant regardless of technology. What newcomers gain is perspective. Pilots speak calmly about terror duty and survival without embellishment. This honesty prepares viewers for understanding jet war as experience rather than entertainment. Aircrews respect how the film allows silence and reflection rather than forcing drama. Ending with this film reinforces why the others matter. Technology changes, speed increases, and stakes grow, but the human inside the cockpit remains vulnerable. Aircrews recommend The Cold Blue because it teaches humility. Before watching jets tear across the sky, newcomers should understand the cost carried by those who flew before them. Jet-age war. Films are more than history lessons. They are quiet warnings written in speed, fuel, and human limits. Aircrews recommend these stories because they teach respect before excitement and understanding before spectacle. Watch them slowly. Listen carefully. Every jet that lifts into the sky carries discipline, fear, and responsibility with it.